Poor girl broke into a company by mistake, and the millionaire CEO fell hopelessly in love. It wasn't the wine that ruined the night. It was the silence that followed the crash. The kind of silence that grips a room full of strangers. When someone like her, too broke to belong, too brave to pretend otherwise, couples a champagne tower with a borrowed tray and trembling hands. Everyone turned, not just out of shock, but because in that single shattering second, a man who hadn't smiled in years did. And somehow, in a world where people are trained to look away, he saw her. The rooftop lights shimmered across Manhattan like diamonds too proud to hide. Far below, the city roared and pulsed. But up here, the world felt muffled, as if even the wind had put on a tuxedo. The inside Whitestone Industries glass tower, everything was polished. The marble floors, the silver cutlery, the practiced smiles. Ellie Brooks adjusted the too-tight catering uniform clinging awkwardly to her waist and prayed the heels she borrowed from her neighbor wouldn't snap. She didn't belong here, not in this world of sparkling laughter and expensive fabric, not under chandeliers taller than her first apartment. But when rent is overdue and your fridge hums louder than it feeds you, you take what shifts you can. And if that shift meant pretending to be a server at a gala she technically wasn't assigned to, so be it. She balanced a tray of mini creme brulees with both hands, elbows out like a tightrope walker, silently repeating her survival mantra. Don't trip. Don't spill. Don't draw attention. She made it exactly 9 steps before everything collapsed. Someone bumped her elbow, maybe not, and the tray tilted. 1, 2, 5 porcelain dishes slid like skaters. The tower of champagne glasses to her left trembled. Type hiccup. The sound cracked through the room like lightning. Shards flew, champagne sprayed. The crowd gasped. A woman in a silk gown shrieked as golden bubbles soaked her heels. A hush fell, slow and sharp, and standing at the center of it, knees shaking, face flushed, and shoes full of sticky sugar, was Ellie. He stared down at the mess like it was a reflection of her entire life. Too loud, too broken, too visible. Her mouth opened to apologize, but then she looked up and locked eyes with him. The man standing just beyond the chaos, the one everyone else looked at with fear or awe, but never both. James Whitestone, CEO, powerhouse, the coldest heart in Manhattan boardrooms. And right now he was staring at her. No, not staring, watching her the way people watch fires, cautiously, unwilling to look away. For a moment he didn't move. Then something impossible happened. He smiled. It was small, barely more than a twitch at the corner of his mouth, but it shattered every rule of who he was supposed to be. Ellie blinked, uncertain if she was hallucinating from embarrassment, but before she could say anything, security started moving in. "I can fix this," she stammered, holding up the tray like a broken shield. "I'll pay for it, or sweep, or leave. Just please don't call the cops. Or my mother." The security guard was already reaching for her elbow when James raised a hand. "Wait." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried, like something used to being obeyed. Ewan froze. "She's with me." The guard paused. "You invited her," James added smoothly, glancing at Ellie. "Didn't I?" Ellie stared at him. His expression didn't change, but in his eyes there was the faintest flicker of something she couldn't name. Amusement? Pity? "Yes," she blurted. "Yes, definitely." Huge misunderstanding. James stepped forward, plucked a napkin off a nearby table, and handed it to her like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You've got caramel on your ear," he said quietly. He wiped it without thinking. Somewhere behind them, a camera clicked. The rest of the night passed in a daze. She was ushered into a side hallway, handed a glass of water by a confused intern, and told to stay put, but no one came back for her. She considered leaving through the service elevator, then thought better of it, mostly because she couldn't find it. So she wandered, and somewhere between a locked media room and a hallway full of people with headsets, she accidentally walked into the main launch room. Big mistake. A massive screen glowed. Dozens of investors filled white chairs. A presenter was missing. Panic buzzed, and then someone handed her a microphone. It happened too fast to protest. A woman in a headset shoved a card in her hand. Smile, read, don't improvise. Ellie squinted at the card. Respiratory technology. Too late. He was pushed onto the stage, blinking under spotlights. And James was in the back row, arms folded, expression unreadable. She cleared her throat. Good evening, professionals of air and breathing. Tonight I'm here to talk about a cutting-edge solution for stuffy situations. Someone in the front row choked on their drink. Ellie soldiered on. This product, which I totally understand, helps people inhale greatness. Laughter rippled across the room. But James laughed too. And that was the night she went viral. Not for genius, not for grace, but for being the girl who crashed a gala, broke a tower, hijacked a product launch, and somehow made the coldest CEO in New York laugh. The video hit 5 million views by morning. And Ellie Brooks? He thought it was the end of her career. If she didn't know, it was the beginning of everything. Chapter 1. The crash that sparked it all. The champagne still clung to her sleeves like a guilty secret. Ellie Brooks sat in the back corridor of Whitestone Tower, with her hands clasped tightly between her knees, trying to ignore the stickiness on her arms and the heavy stares from passing employees. A catering supervisor with a clipboard had walked past 3 times, each glance colder than the last, as if trying to memorize the face of the disaster. They couldn't blame him. He'd knocked over a $7,000 0-cents tower of imported French crystal in front of a crowd of Manhattan's elite. And then somehow she'd ended up on stage. It should have been the end of everything. But instead of security dragging her out by the elbows, the CEO of the entire corporation had stepped in and said 5 words that were now echoing in her head on repeat. She's with me. I invited her. He hadn't even looked at her when he said it. Not directly. Just a cool glance, like he was doing her a favor, like this sort of thing happened every Thursday. But it didn't. Not for a man like James Whitestone. He was the kind of CEO who showed up in Forbes articles without smiling, who made grown executives stumble over their PowerPoint clickers. Rumor had it that in 5 years of running Whitestone Industries, no employee had ever seen him laugh. And then she had. Ellie rubbed her temples. He needed to leave, before anyone changed their mind, before he did. But just as she stood up, the heavy glass door at the end of the hallway opened, and he walked in. James Whitestone. He looked the same as he had earlier, minus the champagne splatter. Black suit tailored like it cost more than her yearly rent, tie loosened half an inch like he'd just returned from a war strategy session. His eyes landed on her like the flick of a judge's gavel. Ellie froze. Hi. He said nothing at first, just stood there, with one hand in his pocket, the other holding a small black file. I thought I told you to stay put, he said finally. I was going to, she said, but then I realized I don't actually work here, or anywhere really. James raised an eyebrow. Right. Ellie continued, babbling now. Just wanted to thank you for earlier. That whole she's with me thing, very presidential. Made me feel like a body double in a Netflix scandal. I appreciate it. He stepped forward. And the stage performance, he asked, was that scripted, or implied? She said proudly, I specialize in catastrophic charm. He actually smirked. That alone sent her heart racing more than it should. James held out the black folder. This is an NDA. You'll need to sign it before you leave. Ellie took the folder, flipped it open, and stared at the paperwork like it was written in Elvish. Is this standard practice for galacrossers? No, he replied. But you're not standard. He glanced up sharply. It was not a compliment, he added dryly. It didn't sound like one, she said, clutching the folder, but just in case I'll take it. For a moment the silence stretched between them again. Not awkward, but oddly full. The way the air feels before a thunderstorm. Finally he said, you shouldn't have been there. I know. You could have been arrested. It would have been a first, she muttered. He studied her. What were you doing at the gala, Miss Brooks? Ellie Brooks. And technically I was working. Kind. James tilted his head. You were not on any staffing list. He looked down. I may have borrowed a friend's ID. I needed the money. Another pause. You crash black tie event? For side income? Only the ones with really tall dissolve. He didn't laugh, but his gaze did soften. Barely. You're not fired, he said after a long pause. Ellie blinked. I'm not. He studied the closer. Leaned his shoulder against the wall. The marketing director saw what happened. She thinks the chaos you caused somehow made the brand look human, as in hopeless. Relatable, he corrected. He laughed. Well, that's what I do, accidentally improve brand relatability. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a slim business card and offered it to her. He took a cup. He took a football. Marketing division, 1-week trial, you start Monday. Your mouth fell open. Wait, what? I just offered you a job. You want me to work here? He looked her over, eyes lingering on the dried caramel at her cuff. No, he said, but I'm curious to see what happens if I let you. Ellie stepped into Whitestone Tower's sleek lobby wearing a wrinkled blazer, off-brand coffee in hand and sneakers she would absolutely swap out before reaching her new desk, if they gave her one. Good morning, she told the security guard at the desk, flashing the badge she'd been mailed, which looked fake even though it wasn't. The elevator dinged. By the time she reached floor 29, she'd rehearsed her intro 20 times. Hi, Ellie. The accident from the gala gave it to professionally trip over more expensive furniture. The marketing bullpen was all glass and steel, sleek desks, silent keyboards, too much cologne. One turned when she entered. She could practically hear the whispers. Is that her? The one from the video, the champagne girl? Why is she here? A man in an over-ironed shirt. Ellie set down her tote. He didn't answer. The morning passed in a blur of paper jam, spilled creamer, and one incident involving a stapler that definitely wasn't her fault. By 11:45 a.m. she had already knocked over 2 coffee mugs, hers and someone else's, sent an inter-office memo to the wrong James, and gotten her ID card stuck in a vending machine. And still, James hadn't come down. He was somewhere far above this floor, locked in the glass cocoon they all whispered about. The man who wore $5,000 0-cent suits and made billion-dollar decisions and, for some unknowable reason, had offered her a job. She tried not to care. But when the elevator dinged again, she looked. It wasn't him. She sighed, turned back to her screen. Then her email pinged. Subject. From Joggy, he white suit. The message. Lunch. 29th floor cafe. Don't trip. Chapter 2. Who hired it? Hurrah. The cafe on floor 29 was too quiet for her liking. Not because there wasn't chatter. There was plenty of that. Soft murmurs over kale salads and overpriced espresso. But the silence felt curated, deliberate, like even the coffee machines had been told to keep it professional. Ellie Brooks sat at a corner table under a pendant light, fiddling with her napkin and staring at the untouched croissants on her plate like it might attack first. Across from her sat James Whitestone. He had removed his suit jacket, rolled up his sleeves to his forearms, and was casually reading something on a sleek black tablet. She wasn't sure if he was aware of how good he looked doing absolutely nothing, but she was painfully aware. When he finally looked up, his eyes flicked to her plate. "You haven't touched it." I'm waiting for it to apologize. It earned a slight tilt of his lips, not a full smile, but a suggestion of one. "This cafe has 5-star reviews," he said. "So does the place that gave me food poisoning last summer," she replied, tearing a corner of the croissant. "Turns out 5 stars are a scam, like dating profiles and unlimited data." James blinked once slowly. She sighed. "I'm sorry, that was weird. I get weird when I'm nervous. Or caffeinated. Or both. I get." Ellie reached for her tea, then paused. "Okay, let me just ask the obvious. Why am I here?" "You're here because you caused a PR disaster that somehow turned into an unexpected marketing win." He squinted. "That doesn't sound like a compliment." It isn't. I'd hate to start this job with high expectations. He studied her, fingers steepled beneath his chin. I don't like unpredictable people. Then hiring me is either the worst or bravest thing you've ever done. I haven't decided yet. Ellie raised her eyebrows. Wow. Motivational, should I embroider that on a pillow? He ignored the comment. Do you know what I do here, Ellie? You run the company? I own the company, he corrected. Right. Slight difference. I just assumed owning meant you had assistants who handled chaos like me. James leaned back slightly. And yet, I've been the one handling you. That shut her up. He let the silence linger for just a moment longer than was comfortable, then said, The board asked me this morning. Who hired her? What's her role? And most importantly, is she safe around live microphones? I mean, I'm great at karaoke, she offered weakly. But I get it. I shouldn't be here. No, James said. You shouldn't. Ellie tried to hide the disappointment in her eyes, but her fingers twitched on the napkin again. But, he added, you are. So now I want to see what you do with it. Her head snapped up. Wait, so I'm not fired? Consider this your probation period. Like, actual probation? More like corporate survival training. Ellie exhaled, leaning back in her chair. Like, don't thank me yet. The people on this floor, they hate you. He blinked. That's refreshingly honest. They think you're an embarrassment, that you're here because I find you entertaining. Well, Ellie muttered, I'm glad to be someone's TikTok algorithm. James didn't smile. Your job is to prove them wrong. Ellie paused. Okay, I can do that. Good, because if you screw this up again, I won't stop them next time. He nodded. Deal. He picked up his tablet again, but just before going back to his reading, he said, Also, don't refer to yourself as the accident from the gala. HR printed that quote on your ID badge. Her eyes widened. You're kidding. He wasn't. Ellie returned to her desk to find an ominous post-it note stuck to her computer screen. The conference room B. She walked in to find 5 people already seated around the long glass table, including Vanessa Sterling, the company's head of PR, and, from what Ellie had gathered from whispered gossip, James's ex-fiancée. Vanessa looked immaculate, like a magazine ad for heartbreak and high heels. Ah, she said with a tight smile. Miss President, he chirped, trying to sound more confident than she felt. Vanessa gestured toward an empty chair. Let's begin. The next 20 minutes were a blur of numbers, projections, and social media metrics. Ellie tried to follow along, but most of it sounded like a foreign language translated by robots. Finally, Vanessa turned to her. So, Ellie, since you're our new in-house relatable girl, tell us, what's your strategic vision for connecting to our Gen Z audience? Ellie blinked. Vanessa waited. The rest of the room did too. Maybe, just don't try so hard, Ellie offered. Like maybe stop using words like relatable and start actually being it. People can smell fake from a mile away. Vanessa arched an eyebrow. Ellie continued before she could stop herself. Maybe instead of polished ads, do something real. Behind-the-scenes clips, bloopers, mess-ups. The kind of stuff people laugh at because they've been there. Like imperfect things people love anyway. There was a pause. Then someone at the far end of the table said quietly, Actually, that's not bad. Vanessa's smile faltered. Fine, she said. Draft a mock campaign. We'll see what Whitestone thinks. Ellie nodded, unsure whether he'd just been challenged or set up. He wasn't supposed to be there. But her mock campaign folder was due by 5 p.m., and her email was down, and no one answered the phone. So, like any emotionally reckless intern, she marched up to the 45th floor. The doors to his office were open. James was at his desk, sleeves rolled, tie abandoned. Sorry, she said, hovering in the doorway. Your assistant vanished. Also, the copier bit me. Also, I brought the mock-ups. He looked up. You printed them? Email was down. He extended a hand. Ellie crossed the room, handed over the folder, then paused. There's a post-it on page 3. Ignore the doodle. He flipped it open. Her post-it note was shaped like a star. She'd drawn a tiny, smiling coffee cup and wrote, "This idea is probably dumb," in all caps. James looked at it for a long time. "I like the coffee cup." Ellie tilted her head. "You're weird. You can't." They stared at each other. The air thickened. Then he broke the moment. "You can go." He turned, hesitated. "Hey, can I ask you something?" He waited. "What?" He said, "You don't like unpredictable people." Was that a warning? He paused. It was a confession. Ellie stared at him, something about the way he said it quiet, tired. And just before she left, he added, "Page 4 is good. We'll use it." Ellie walked out smiling. It gave her a shock. But she was starting to wonder if she might be the first real disruption James Whitestone hadn't tried to erase. Step 3. The elevator chaos theory. The elevator at Whitestone Tower had one unspoken rule: no eye contact before Everyone stood in tense, mirrored silence, straight-backed, blank-faced, pretending not to exist. Ellie Brooks, however, had never been good with unspoken rules, especially in enclosed metal boxes. On Wednesday morning, armed with a smoothie, a thrifted blazer, and an optimism she didn't trust, she stepped into the crowded executive elevator and sneezed violently. The man beside her jumped. "Bless you," someone muttered behind a leather portfolio. "Sorry," Ellie sniffed. "I'm allergic to nerves and—" No one laughed. Of course they didn't. These were people who probably scheduled their laughter with Outlook reminders. Except one person. All the way in the back, just before the doors slid open on floor 29, James Whitestone gave the smallest, most imperceptible smirk, then stepped off without a word. Ellie blinked. Did it count as flirting? Ellie's desk, wedged between the copier and a vending machine that only accepted Canadian coins, was exactly where it had been. Underwhelming, underheated, and undeniably hers. A small cactus named Janet sat beside her keyboard, a gift from the cleaning lady who'd said, "You look like someone who forgets to water things." Ellie had taken it as a compliment. Today's mission was straightforward: update the internal launch guide for the new Whitestone Wellness Initiative. Easy, right? Except 20 minutes in, someone screamed. It wasn't a horror movie scream, more like a corporate cry of existential panic. "Where's the new pitch deck?" came a voice from conference room A. "Where is it?" Ellie peeked around the corner. Inside, chaos bloomed. Marketing heads pacing, assistants on phones, techs sweating under screens. A massive presentation was scheduled in 1 hour. A pitch to an international eco-partnership that could open Whitestone Industries to the European market. And the file was missing. Ellie, still holding her smoothie like a shield, slipped inside unnoticed. "You check the network drive. Go. It's gone. Go gone." Ellie cleared her throat. No one noticed. She stepped closer. Sorry, not to interrupt the corporate meltdown, but maybe it's not missing." A PR exec whirled on her. "Who are you again?" "Ellie. Office Chaos Goblin. It's on my badge." She pointed to her ID, which still read, "The Occident from the Gala." People groaned. "No offense," said the exec, "but this isn't your department." "Right," Ellie agreed, "but I helped with version 3 of the deck yesterday. I think someone saved it under a different client folder." The silence. The room froze. Then someone scrambled to a nearby laptop, typed furiously, and gasped. "It's here." Ellie smiled. Sometimes disasters remember where the files go. James stood at the window of his office, one hand in his pocket, the other cradling a glass of mineral water that probably cost more than Ellie's lunch budget for the week. Behind him, his assistant entered. "Sir, update from marketing. The pitch meeting succeeded. Partner representatives were impressed. They mentioned a girl named Ellie." He didn't turn around. "I know. You solved it." "I know," he said again, quieter. The assistant hesitated. "And what do you want me to do with her?" James finally looked up. Nothing. He then got up. Yet, Ellie stayed late, mostly because she'd lost track of time printing new staff training folders, and also because the copier had jammed again. She was on her knees beside the tray, hands covered in toner, muttering to the machine like it had betrayed her. "Don't take this personally, but I think you're evil." "You're talking to the copier?" came a familiar voice. He turned to find James leaning in the doorway, watching her like she was some exotic musibet. He blinked. "You came to witness the chaos firsthand." He walked in, crouched beside her, and gently tapped a hidden latch. The tray slid open, revealing the jammed paper. He blinked. "How did you—" "Even CEOs make copies," he said. "You? Really?" "You used to, before the suits and stock options." Ellie wiped her hands on a napkin from her purse. "Thanks for not firing me today." James raised an eyebrow. "For fixing the for talking in a meeting, for breathing near the executive floor, for looking directly at Vanessa." "But she's not a basilisk," he said. "Could have fooled me." He smiled. Ellie's stomach did something unprofessional. "Anyway," she said, standing awkwardly, "you probably have important CEO things to do. I should go." He grabbed her bag and turned to leave, but James spoke again quietly. "Ellie," he stopped. He hesitated, then said, "You were right about the campaign, about the messy stuff?" Ellie turned, eyes wide. "You mean—" He grinned. "Let your pitch," he said. "We start filming Monday. You'll oversee the pilot." He blinked. "Yeah. You want the girl who spilled creme brulee on the head of finance to run your flagship campaign." James stepped closer. "You're the first person in years to remind this company it's allowed to be human." He swallowed. "You wouldn't screw it up." "I'll do my best." "And don't," he said. "Do better than that." He smiled. I'll try." He paused again. "And Ellie." "Yes, to get rid of that badge." He looked down. He nodded. "You've earned a new name." He grinned. "What should it be?" James turned back to the door. Chapter. The moment Vanessa Sterling walked into the building, the temperature dropped 5 degrees. Her heels clicked on the marble like a metronome of judgment. Her trench coat was cinched tight around her waist, and not a single strand of her chestnut hair was out of place. She carried herself like a runway model moonlighting as a corporate assassin, and everyone noticed. Ellie definitely did. She was returning from lunch, or more accurately, from a failed attempt to microwave soup without exploding it, when she spotted Vanessa at the main reception, signing in with the kind of poise that said, "You should already know who I am." Ellie paused, watched, took in the way receptionists straightened their spines, the way James's assistant practically jogged down the hallway to greet her. And just like that, Ellie felt small again. Like the girl in the wrong shoes at the wrong party, waiting for someone to tap her shoulder and say, "Sorry, you don't belong here." She backed away before anyone could see her. Back at her desk, she tried to ignore the whispers, tried not to Google James Whitestone Vanessa Sterling history, tried not to look at the social media hits from their past life together, Power Couple Inc., back when they were photographed in black ties and whispered about in boardrooms. But curiosity was a disease, and insecurity was fuel. When Vanessa appeared in the marketing wing 2 hours later, Ellie wasn't surprised. She was, however, completely unprepared. Vanessa spotted her instantly. "Ooh," she said, voice smooth as glass. "You must be the—" "Ellie," she replied, rising from her chair too fast and knocking over her penholder. Vanessa didn't blink. "Right, the one from the gala. You're—" "Yeah." He always dreamed of becoming a cautiontail." There was a pause. A long, sharp silence where Vanessa's eyes seemed to strip Ellie down to threadbare pieces. "I was just upstairs with James," she said casually, walking a slow circle around the copier like a lion deciding whether it was worth the hunt. "He told me about your— said you were interesting." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. That's usually code for unpredictable. Ellie stood her ground. "Barely. I think he meant it as a compliment." Vanessa stepped closer. "Let me give you some advice, Ellie. This world, it's not built for unpredictability. It's built for precision, for control. You lean in slightly. And if you're not careful, people like James won't protect you. They'll observe you until you're no longer entertained. With that, she turned. Ellie stared after her. Getting entertaining? That word echoed longer than it should have. Vanessa stayed the wreck of the day. At one point, Ellie saw her inside James's glass-walled office. They were standing close, talking in low tones, laughing, the full kind but the familiar kind. And then, at the end of the conversation, Vanessa leaned in and touched his arm. Ellie looked away. That even, she worked late. He didn't have to, but something in her itched, restless, not ready to go home with those images dancing in her head. He was adjusting the formatting on a slideshow. He looked tired, looser around the edges. His tie was off, shirt collar open. "You're still here," he said. "I could say the same to you." He walked toward her desk. "I saw your draft edits, clean. Better than the last team's." Like a pause. Then she said, too fast, "Vanessa was here today." "I know." He stopped by marketing. She said I was into. James didn't respond. Ellie's chest tightened. Was she wrong? He looked at her, long and unreadable. "You're not interesting." Her breath caught. "You're disruptive," he said. "You make people uncomfortable. You turn routines inside out. And for some reason, I haven't asked you to stop." Ellie folded her arms. "That's either the nicest thing anyone said to me, or the cruelest." Another pause. He looked down. "She doesn't get to decide your place here," he said finally. "Neither does anyone else." "But you do." "Yes," he admitted. "Then tell me," she said, suddenly brave. "Do I actually belong here, or are you just—" His jaw tensed. And for the first time, he didn't answer. Chapter 5. The Viral Girl. The video was only 60 seconds long. It started with champagne, ended with laughter. And somewhere in the middle it captured the exact moment a girl named Ellie Brooks slipped on a marble floor, took down a 5-tier dessert tower, and made the coldest CEO in New York laugh like he hadn't in years. The video hit 1 million views before noon. By lunch it was everyone. Real corporate chaos. Girl rep at CEO's gala. Whitestone's new intern breaks the internet, and nearly a waiter's arm. Did this clumsy woman just save $1 billion brat with one fall? Ellie was eating yogurt in the break room when it happened. The marketing team burst in like they'd found fire. "Ellie," one of them gasped, shoving their phone into her face. "You're trending." Her spoon froze mid-bite. "I'm what?" The screen showed a freeze frame, her on her knees, surrounded by broken glass and flying macarons. James in the background, smiling. Ellie nearly dropped her yogurt. "Oh no." "Oh yes," said a junior designer. "You've gone full viral. Twitter, TikTok, Reddit. Even my mom sent me a link." Ellie scanned the comments, her heart in her throat. He would die for this woman's enemy. This is the rom-com we've been waiting for. The way that CEO looks at her, I felt that in my uterus. Others was less generous. Nepotism fail. She only got hired because she's quirky cute. Please tell me she's not in charge of anything important. Ellie put the phone down. Suddenly the walls felt too close. Her skin felt too loud. "I have to go," she said, grabbing her bag. "But what?" She didn't argue. James was already reading the article when his phone buzzed with the PR team's panic. He didn't flinch, didn't speak, just watched the looped video silently on his screen. Ellie's fall, the crowd's gasp, the champagne exploding like fireworks. He hadn't realized it in the moment, hadn't felt it like a performance. But now, seeing it from the outside, it looked dull. Like something he couldn't take back. There was a knock. He looked up. Ellie stood at the door, pale, holding her phone like it might combust. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she said, stepping inside. "I know. It wasn't me who posted it, I swear." "I believe you." He stopped. "Then why do you look like I just torched your company?" He stood, walked slowly around the desk. "Because this," he gestured at the screen, "isn't just a moment anymore. It's a narrative, a story, and people twist stories." He folded her arms. "Are you worried about them twisting you or twisting me?" His silence told her everything. Ellie's throat tightened. "Right, got it." He turned to leave, but he stopped her. "I never wanted this to get out." "I know," she said, "because this job wasn't supposed to have feelings, just function." "Ellie, don't," she said softly. "It's okay. I'm used to being the side character in someone else's highlight reel." He watched her go, and for the first time in years, James Whitestone felt something like regret settle behind his ribs. Ellie expected paperwork, a quiet apology, maybe even a mutual "this isn't working" exit form. What she didn't expect was to walk in and find HR reviewing her employment eligibility under ethical concerns. "There's been an anonymous report," the woman said crisply, "accusing you of leveraging personal exposure to gain undue access to the CEO." Ellie blinked. I'm sorry, what?" "The complaint says you've been using a viral moment." Ellie laughed. "Once, harshly. I tripped on a dessert cart. That's not a promotion strategy." The HR rep didn't smile. "Until this is reviewed, we're suspending your access to non-public floors, and your badge." They took her badge. Like she was a threat. Like she hadn't worked nights, fought for that ridiculous campaign, stayed quiet every time someone looked at her like she was a joke. Ellie walked out with her backpack sagging off one shoulder. Somehow it felt heavier than ever. He was reading the internal memo when his door burst open. Ellie stood there, eyes rimmed red, jaw set hard. "You let them suspend me?" James stood. I did good, but you didn't stop it either." He stepped closer. "There's a process. I was going to fix it." "No," she snapped. "You were going to watch it. Like you watched the video. Like you watched me fall. Always watching. Never choosing." Joint. Flinch. Ellie's voice broke. "I didn't ask for this. I didn't want to be a hashtag. But I thought maybe I mattered here." "You do," he said. She shook her head. "Not enough." Then softer. "Or maybe, just not the way I wanted." And she wowed out. This time he didn't. Chapter 6. The Girl in the Copy Room. The copy room always smelled faintly of toner, melted plastic, and resignation. It was after hours. The office was silent. The lights in the hallway were dim to conserve energy, but the glow from the machine bathed the room in a sterile kind of comfort. Ellie sat on the floor, back against the cabinet, knees pulled to her chest. Her badge, or what used to be her badge, sat in her lap like a dead bird. She'd turned it over at least 100 times since HR took it, still expecting it to hum with warmth or maybe whisper something back. But it didn't. It just lay there, cold plastic and disappointment. She was exhausted, not just from the viral attention or the rumors or even James's silence. She was exhausted from always feeling like she didn't belong anywhere, like she was just visiting someone else's life and would be escorted out as soon as the laughter died down. The campaign she helped build was launching without her. The badge she'd earned was gone. The man she was falling for had chosen nothing. Not her, not anyone, just silence. A paper jam blinked on the copier beside her, its little red light pulsing like a heart monitor in the dark. "Of course," she muttered, "even the machines have breakdowns." She leaned her head against the wall, eyes fluttering closed. That's how James found her. Not in a conference room, not behind a desk, but sitting on the floor of the copy room, arms around her legs, the echo of 1,000 whispered doubts lingering around her like ghosts. But he didn't speak right away, just stood in the doorway watching her in that maddening way of his. Quiet, still. He would come to repossess the copier too, she murmured without looking up. "No," he said softly, "just checking on the girl who keeps fixing everything and calling it an accident." She looked up, tired. "What are you doing here, James?" I could ask her the same. It was From what? He shrugged. From being the punchline again. He stepped into the room, closed the door behind him. It clicked with a finality that made the air feel heavier. "You're not a punchline." She looked at him, eyes sharp even through the exhaustion. "Then why didn't you say that? When HR dragged me in, when the rumors started, when your ex basically implied I was a joke you'd get tired of." James didn't answer at first. Then he leaned against the opposite wall, arms crossed. "Because I've spent most of my life trying not to feel anything too loudly." He blinked. What? He exhaled. "When my mother died, I was 16. My father ran a business empire and couldn't even look me in the eye at the funeral. I learned early that feelings were liabilities, so I stopped having them, or pretending I didn't. I built walls," he said, voice rough. "Polished, well-furnished ones. Boardrooms. Plans. Distance." And then he looked at her. He walked in, wearing 2 different earrings, apologizing to a copier, and somehow you made all of it crack. Ellie's throat tightened. "And I hated you for it," he admitted, "because you reminded me what I'd buried." Silence. Ellie sat up straighter. "So, what now?" James looked at her. Really looked. "I'm not good at this," he said, "at choosing at risk." "Then don't make a speech," she said. "Just answer one question." He nodded. "Do you want me here?" Her voice cracked. "Not for the campaign. Not for the optics. Me." His answer was quiet. Immediate. "Yes." He blinked, unsure she'd heard him. "Yes," he repeated. "I want you here. I want you in rooms you think you don't belong in. I want you to say the wrong thing and fix it anyway. I want you to challenge the way this place breathes." He crossed the room. He picked up her bag from the floor. "I can't promise I won't mess it up," he said, "but I can promise I'll stop being a bystander." The offer people came. It had been updated, a new label printed underneath her name. Ellie Brooks, Creative Strategy. Her hands shook as she took it. "Is this official?" "I have a copy machine witnessed," he said. "Should hold up in court." Ellie laughed, watery and small. Then she looked at him, really looked, and said, "Huh." And in that quiet, fluorescent-lit room, surrounded by jammed paper and toner fumes, James leaned forward. No crowd, no cameras. "You just..." And he kissed her like he was remembering how. Chapter 7. "You're not a..." There was nothing more dangerous in a corporate building than a room full of people pretending to be calm. Conference room Alpha was packed. Board members, senior execs, PR heads, legal counsel. And in the corner, Ellie Brooks, gripping her notebook like it might stop her from disappearing. The campaign she had helped create, Whitestone Unfiltered, had launched the night before. It had gone viral. Okay. Only this time, it wasn't fun. An out-of-sequence clip of Ellie laughing on camera while James stood beside her had circulated with the caption, "This is who's running the company now." The internet split into factions, those who loved her authenticity and those who saw her as a threat to everything professional. Investors had questions, clients had concerns, and now the board had convened. The room buzzed with low murmurs and false smiles as the chairman, a polished man named Frederick Langston, cleared his throat. "Let's begin." Ellie swallowed hard. Vanessa Sterling was seated 3 chairs away, wearing an expression that could only be described as serpentine glee. The campaign spoke first. The campaign numbers are unconventional, viral engagement, yes, but also headlines we didn't anticipate. He turned to James. "Do you still stand by your decision to greenlight this initiative?" James's face was unreadable. "Been booted." Vanessa raised her hand, polite and deadly. "With respect, the company's stock dropped 0.5 point this morning. Perception matters, especially when our leadership is linked to someone with no background, no polish, and forgive me, no filter." Ellie's cheeks burned. Her hand tightened around his. James looked at Vanessa. "Do you have a question or just a monologue?" Vanessa blinked. "I'm simply stating what the press and this room are already thinking." That was when Ellie stood. We hadn't planned to. But something inside her snapped, the part that was tired of being spoken about instead of spoken to. I'd like to respond. So long. Langston raised an eyebrow. You're not required to. I know, I want to. He stepped forward. Her hands trembled, but her voice was steady. I'm not from this world, she said. I didn't go to Wharton. I've never chaired a summit. I've worked 3 jobs, spilled coffee on myself more times than I can count. And until last month I thought equity was just a fancy word for fairness. There were a few stiff chuckles. But I also know this. People are tired of perfection. They're tired of brands that talk like robots and CEOs who smile like billboards. They want something real. And maybe I'm not qualified in the traditional sense, but I know how to tell the truth. He looked at James, and then back at the board. You don't have to like me, but you can't pretend I don't work. I've stayed late, fixed messes, pitched ideas, and put my entire heart into a company that never expected me to last a week. A beat of silence. Do what you have to do, but don't call me a job. And then she sat down. Hands shaking, heart pounding. The room was silent for a moment too long. Then James, sir. Let me be clear, he said, voice calm but firm. Ellie Brooks is not here as a favor. She's not a distraction, and she's certainly not a joke. He looked at each board member in turn. She's here because she's the only one in this room who had the courage to be honest, even when the rest of us forgot how. He turned to Langston. If you want to vote on something today, vote on whether or not you still want a company that leads by example or one that hides behind press releases. Langston sat back, quiet, impressed. Vanessa said nothing. And Ellie, for the first time since this all began, felt something she hadn't let herself believe in. Belonging. That night, she did go home. She sat on the rooftop patio of the building instead, curled in a blanket from the marketing lounge, sipping coffee James had brought without asking. The city glowed beneath them, 1,000 lights, 1,000 stories. James sat beside her, silent. He turned to him. You didn't have to say what you said. Yes, he replied. He sipped his coffee. You still care about the person. I do, he said, but I care more about the person who. He smiled, soft and tired. He reached out, not to hold her hand but to rest his on the rooftop ledge, just close enough that she could touch it if she wanted. She did, and in the quiet that followed, she finally let herself believe it. He wasn't a guest in someone else's life anymore. It made a place of her own. Chapter 8. The gala we played. The invitation arrived on the Friday, slipped beneath her office door. It was small, heavy, printed on thick black cardstock with gold lettering that shimmered faintly under the light. Night, no expectations, just you and the man who hasn't stopped thinking about the crash. Joey? Ellie blinked at it for a long moment, half expecting it to self-destruct or burst into confetti. Instead, it just sat there, soft and terrifying. He turned it over. A date. A time. Tonight. And no instructions. No dress code. Just. That was the scariest part. The elevator doors slid open onto something out of a dream. Soft lights strung across the ceiling. A string quartet playing something delicate in the corner. And in the center of the ballroom, where a champagne tower once stood broken and soaked in sugar, stood a single table for 2, flanked by fairy lights and a silent dessert cart. Ellie stepped in, heels clicking softly, her breast caught somewhere behind her ribs. James stood near the window, watching the city like he hadn't already chosen the most beautiful thing in the room. She hadn't worn anything fancy, just a navy dress she'd borrowed once for a cousin's wedding. Her hair was half up, slightly windblown from the walk, but he turned like she was wearing something divine. He smiled, and this time it wasn't fake. It was real. You came, he said. Wasn't sure I would, she replied. Or could. He hesitated because I didn't want to ruin anything else. He walked toward her. You didn't ruin anything. It destroyed a champagne tower, got suspended, made your board question your judgment. You reminded me what I want to protect. He blinked, then looked around. So, what is this, an apology dinner? James shook his head. It's a reset. He gestured to the table. That night, the gala, I watched you crash through a world you didn't belong to, and instead of breaking, you built something out of it. I broke your reputation, she said, softly. You fixed my sonnets. He led her to the table. They sat. A server, one she'd never seen, appeared with plates of her favorite food. How did you know I like this? She asked. I listen, he said, even when I look like I don't. He laughed, surprised by how easily it came now. They ate, talked, shared bites and stories. He told her about the piano in his childhood home that no one ever played. She told him about the sweater she wore under every interview, blasé, because it made her feel less fake. And then, after dessert, he stood. I want to show you something. He walked to the center of the room, where the champagne tower once stood, and pointed to the rebuilt sculpture, glowing under soft golden lights. It's glass, he said, fragile, just like that night. He walked toward him. You rebuilt it. I needed to prove to myself that just because something breaks doesn't mean it has to stay broken. He looked at them. He held out his hand. And this time, when she took it, she didn't trip. They didn't dance. There was no music now, just the hum of the city below and the soft click of her breath syncing with his. I didn't fall into your life, James, she whispered. You pulled me into it. I know, he said, and I haven't stopped holding on since. Then, quietly, without cameras or whispers or headlines, he kissed her. Not out of pity, not out of guilt, but because he'd been waiting to do it right. And she let herself kiss him back, not because she'd dreamed of this moment, but because, somehow, this was better. It was theirs. Later, when the lights dimmed and the city quieted, James walked her to the elevator. Before the doors closed, he leaned in and said, I have one request. Megan, next time you crash a party, wear this. He put something in her hand, a tiny glass pin, shaped like a champagne flute. Ellie looked down, then up at him. And you'll try not to knock it over. Just do what you always do. Which is, show up, and make me feel like everything I built was waiting for you. Chapter 9. The Clause. On Monday morning, Ellie walked into the office humming. Not because anything magical had happened that morning. Her coffee still spilled in her tote bag, and the elevator still stalled on floor 12 like it always did, but because for the first time in a long time, her heart didn't feel like it was wearing armor. The rooftop gala wasn't a dream. Jake had kissed her. Like a man escaping his loneliness, but like a man finally choosing not to be alone. They hadn't made anything official, hadn't needed to. The look in his eyes had said enough. I see you. I want you here. He tucked her badge into her blazer and turned the corner toward her desk, then stopped short. Vanessa Sterling was already there. Perched on Ellie's desk like a trophy wife in waiting, she was tapping something glossy against her knee, a cream folder with gold accents, her lips pressed in an expression halfway between smug and saintly. Morning, Vanessa said. Hope you don't mind. I borrowed your chair. Ellie smiled tightly. Funny, I thought you had a permanent seat on your own high horse. Vanessa's smirk never wavered. Oh, I love our little chats, but I came to drop something off. She held out the folder. What is it? Ellie asked, not moving to take it. Oof, Vanessa said sweetly. Of what happens when little girls try to rewrite billion-dollar legacies with mood boards and snack carts. Ellie took the folder, opened it, and felt the floor tilt beneath her. The inside was a scanned contract, one with official Whitestone Industries letterhead. Law 17B. PR liability protection. In the event of any romantic involvement between the CEO and an employee, the board reserves the right to initiate a vote of no confidence unless said involvement is disclosed in writing and approved under reputational protocols. Below that, such relationships are deemed high risk and subject to immediate termination of the involved employee at board discretion. Ellie looked up slowly. You had this drawn up? Vanessa laughed. Darling, this was written years ago, back when James and I were still planning the wedding. It's a relic, like vintage perfume, just waiting for the right occasion to reopen. Ellie's mouth went dry. So that's the game. Get me fired. Oh no, Vanessa said, leaning in. You're going to walk, because if you don't, you'll be the James sat behind his desk, scrolling through the next quarter's reports when Ellie stepped in without knocking. She never... But this time she didn't smile either. He dropped the folder on his desk. He glanced at it, then opened it, and his face changed. How long have you known? She asked. A while, he said quietly. It was from the old board. It's been buried for years. Then why didn't you tell me? He looked at her. Because I didn't want it to matter. But it does, she whispered. James closed the folder. The board can't remove me without a full vote. Which Vanessa is already pushing for, Ellie said. She's ready. She has the narrative, the time. Hijacked. Ellie stepped closer. James, this isn't just about your job. It's your company, your name. His eyes searched hers. And you think I should let you go because of that? He hesitated. No, she said. I think you shouldn't have to choose. But I do, he said softly, and I won't let you carry the cost. A silence fell. He stood. Mary, fix this. But as she turned to leave, she paused in the doorway. I don't want to be the girl who almost made you lose everything, she said. I want to be the one who helped you remember why it mattered in the first place. And then, softer, but if that means leaving, I will. He didn't stop her. Not because he didn't care, but because the only thing worse than losing her would be seeing her destroyed for loving him. Chapter 10. The Girl Who Didn't Back Down. The Whitestone Tower, he'd never seen anything like it. Not when the IPO went public. Not when James Whitestone took over as CEO at 29. Not even during last year's press debacle when an ex-executive accidentally posted a shirtless golf selfie on the company feed. No, this was bigger, because on this rainy Thursday morning the board had gathered not to discuss assets or growth strategy. They were meeting to decide whether the CEO had become a liability, all because of one woman. And that woman, Ellie Brooks. The moment she stepped in, every voice paused. A few mouths dropped. Someone actually whispered, "Is she serious?" Ellie didn't flinch. She wore a simple black blouse, her hair pulled back, rain still drying at her temples. She looked calm, whole, but her hands inside her sleeves were trembling. James stood up instinctively. I have something to say, she interrupted gently, and I think you all should hear it before you vote. Langston, the chair of the board, narrowed his eyes. Ms. Brooks, this is an executive session. Then consider me the inconvenient truth: executive sessions never prepare. He moved to the center of the room next to the massive glass table. I know what you think I am, the clumsy girl from the video, the one who went viral, then went too far. No one responded. But I am not here because I tripped into power. I'm here because I earned trust, the kind that doesn't come from a resume or a family name. She looked around the room, her voice steady now. James Whitestone didn't break a policy. He broke a pattern of silence, of cold leadership, of staying safe while the rest of us pretend that professionalism means pretending to feel nothing at all. He took a breath. Yes, we were involved. And no, it didn't start with a plan. It started with a crash, and a man who didn't laugh until I made a mess of everything. There were a few stifled. But if you're scared that love makes leadership weak, then maybe you don't understand leadership. She turned to Langston. If I'm the reason you vote him out, do it. But don't say it's because he lost control. Say it's because he finally let someone in. And with that she placed the folder, the clause, in the center of the table. I was on. James stood. Ellie. But she raised a hand, gentle. You won't lose your company over me. I won't let you. Then she looked at each of them, one last time, and walked out. The room was silent for a long time. Until a client, he's thrown. She stood near the edge of the rooftop garden, watching clouds turn amber over the Hudson, her heart hollow and proud all at once. Then she heard footsteps. He didn't need to turn to know who it was. James stepped beside her, quiet. "They called off the vote," he said, though she didn't answer. "They tore up the clause," he added. "Langston said it was outdated, called you the best thing that's happened to this company's culture since coffee." Ellie laughed and looked at him. "You kept your company." He looked back, and I almost lost everything else. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out something small, folded paper. "I had this written last week. Was going to read it after dinner that night. Then everything happened." He handed it to her. He unfolded it, slow. It wasn't a speech. It was a note, written in messy ink-blotted script. "You walked into my life like a storm. You didn't fix anything neatly. You just reminded me what it means to be alive, while everything's still breaking. I didn't want to build a perfect life. I want to build one with you." Her eyes welled. "Is this a proposal?" she whispered. He took her hand. "No," he said. "It's a beginning." And under the city sky they kissed again. No fear. No perfect. Just two people choosing to fall, together, no matter what broke along the way. The glass. They didn't get a fairy tale ending. Because fairy tales are made of things that never go wrong. Ellie and James got something better. They got something that cracked and spilled and almost fell apart, but didn't. A month after the board meeting, Ellie returned to Whitestone Tower, not as a viral sensation, not as someone's mistake. As herself. Her new title read, Director of Human Creative Strategy. Someone had added a small gold champagne glass beneath her name. She still didn't know who. James never brought up the clause again. Instead, he brought her coffee, took her to lunch, walked her to meetings he didn't even need to attend. Slowly, the man who once ran from emotion started choosing it. Out loud, in public, without apology. Sometimes she caught him watching her, not with awe but with ease. Like he had finally stopped waiting for her to vanish. At night, when the office lights dimmed and the city blinked to life beyond the windows, they sat on the rooftop and rewrote their own version of ambition, one that included quiet dinners, stupid inside jokes, and spontaneous late-night trips to the copy room, where she still couldn't figure out how to change the toner. He never taught her. Because some things were better messy. And Ellie, she never stopped being the girl who spilled things. Only now, when she dropped something, she knew someone would be there to help her pick it up. We couldn't do it alone. But because finally, sometimes, the strongest kind of love isn't the one that waits for perfection. It's the kind that stays, even when you knock over everything around you. So if you've ever felt like you didn't belong, if you've ever tripped your way into someone's heart and wondered if it was real, if you've ever believed that messiness makes you unworthy of being chosen, let this be your reminder. Love doesn't ask for perfection. It asks for courage and a little grace when the champagne falls. If this story moved you, if you've ever been the underdog, the outsider, the girl with too much heart and not enough polish, what moment in your life made you feel seen, even when the world wasn't watching? We'd love to hear it. Because the world needs more stories that start with a stumble and end with someone staying.